So I'm going to read from the middle of the story, for a change. So I have, in this part of the story, they're in space, and two of the astronauts are sort of like having a discussion by the airlock. I know how the airlock works. It allows entry or exit without compromising the environment inside the ship. How does it do that? Harry asked. Why are you asking me? It has two doors, well, two pressure-sealed hatches and a space in between. One opens into space and the other into the ship. If someone is leaving, the compartment between depressurizes. The opposite happens if they are entering. They were standing before it, the round door with the fat metal hatches. Jesse peered into his reflection in the airlock's porthole as Harry found the gearbox mounted on the side of the wall and twisted the handle. The hinge mechanism groaned, and then, with a low hiss of air, the hatch swung open. The airlock was about the size of their tiny bathroom. Two spacesuits were charging, hooked up on either wall. They stared out at Jesse like astronauts with darkness for eyes. On the far end of the window was space. You're scared? Harry asked. There's nothing to be scared of. Exactly. But that's hard to remember sometimes. During training, they put us in a sensory deprivation chamber to see how long we could stand it. No light, no sound. Most people can't last 15 minutes before they begin to see things, begin to panic. They don't even know what they're afraid of sometimes, themselves maybe. In the darkness, every fear finds a face. You imagine being buried alive, being paralyzed, and some people can't handle it. Jesse shuddered as he too imagined it. He was silently glad that this ordeal had been omitted from his own training. He tried to picture Harry in the darkness. Do you know how long I managed it? Harry was still talking. 7 hours, 43 minutes. Sounds impossible, especially for someone like you, who's afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of anything, Jesse said. Prove it. Harry folded his arms and smiled. Jesse could only see part of Harry's face in the half-light of the corridor. He was dressed in his uniform, as he usually was during the daytime, clean-shaven, his straight blonde hair slicked back from his forehead. Jesse swallowed, a lie suddenly on his lips. I actually have a fit check in 5 minutes, so maybe another time? Then this will only take 5 minutes. Jesse's heart sank. He had no choice but to step inside the airlock. Harry's silhouette was backlit on the threshold behind him. Igor will probably tell you that when Russian astronauts train, they're put in isolation chambers for weeks sometimes, Harry said. Some of them call it the Chamber of Silence. Can you imagine it, Jesse? Can you imagine what thoughts would be going through your nervous head? There's more to being an astronaut than just wanting it, you know. You have to prove you can do it. He paused, and then the dread in Jesse's stomach grew. The astronauts can't fear enclosed spaces, Harry said, his fingers on the handle. Jesse's nerves panged. In another moment, Harry would close the hatch and he would be left alone there. No, don't. The astronaut can't fear the darkness. Jesse saw Harry's silhouetted hand lift and realized too late that he was letting the airlock close. Harry! Jesse rushed towards the door as it shut. No! The astronaut can't fear death. A hiss of air as the door sealed closed, and Jesse was left alone in the almost blackness. All the sound from the noisy ship disappeared, and he could hear only his own heavy breathing and the sweat prickling on his back. The air was stale and unmoving. How long until it ran out? Harry, he called, this isn't funny. I won't panic, he thought to himself, but still he remained pressed up against the door. Sinister shapes were already beginning to encroach upon him in the darkness. He blinked them away. You said 5 minutes. 5 minutes. How long had it been already? 1? 30 seconds. He just had to keep calm for 5 minutes and then Harry would free him. He tried to distract himself by taking deep breaths, but inhaling the still air only made him nervous. Jesse had often thought about what it might feel like to suffocate. The agony of oxygen deprivation, the clenching full-body panic that came with it, getting trapped under ice and drowning. A sudden final scream of desperation as he fought to suck in air into his deflated lungs and instead felt the violation of freezing water rushing into his mouth, his throat sealing shut. Harry! Harry's smiling face lit up the porthole, his voice audible through the intercom on the side. Scared already? He asked. What little light there was glinted off his retinas. You're not much of an astronaut, are you? I knew there was a reason you didn't make it the first time round. "This isn't funny," Jesse called, slamming his hand against the window. It was so thick, 2 sheets of bolted polycarbonate, that he wasn't sure that Harry could hear him. Being in the airlock is not half as scary as being in space. While the 6 of us were cramming physiology exams, you were probably smoking weed and contemplating cloud formations or whatever else it is you did with your abundant free time, so let me fill you in. There's one door separating you from the hard vacuum of space, the void between astronomical bodies, the possibly infinite ocean of mostly nothingness. It's a bit like death. But do you know what would be more like death? Me, out here, turning this handle and watching you float out into space. What would a place like that do to a body like yours? Jesse's mouth went dry as he imagined it, the latches unbuckling, the airlock depressurizing, the door swinging open. This was the closest to the emptiness of space he had ever been. If he pressed his hands against the icy surface of the hatch, he might even feel it, some of the coldness of space, around minus 270 degrees centigrade. But instead, he was running a trembling finger along the edges of the door, looking for an emergency button or a loose seal, an escape. "Want to know a little something about surviving in space?" Harry asked. "When I open the airlock and all the oxygen rushes out, try not to hold your breath. If you do, the air in your chest expands, your lungs will rupture, and the bubbles will spill out into your bloodstream, and your girlish scream of terror might just be the thing that saves your life for a minute. And then, up there, of course, no one will be able to hear you. You'll collapse after about 15 seconds and begin to turn blue, though you look pretty blue to me already. No pressure in space means that despite the sub-zero temperatures, all the water in your eyes and mouth will actually boil. Oh, and your body will swell to twice the size. Are you listening?" Jesse was screaming for help now, banging his sweaty hands against the door, hoping anyone might hear him. His heart kicked against his chest. The air in the room was smothering. One comforting thought is that a human can survive over a minute out in space before he dies. So, if the ship's doctor hauled your body back inside and injected you with pressurized oxygen before your heart gave up entirely, you might just make it. I mean, you'd be in excruciating pain, but you'd be alive. So let's see for ourselves, shall we? The moment Jesse saw Harry's face in the window, he knew he was actually going to do it. Harry reached out and twisted the equalization valve. As he did so, Jesse heard the hiss as the airlock depressurized by venting air out into space. He almost thought he could see the white plumes of gas bulge out into the darkness. 5 seconds, Harry called out. The little hand of the pressure gauge slid down. Jesse clawed at the inner hatch. In 4 seconds, the outer airlock would unlatch and he would be ripped out of the safety of the ship. This was it, he realized with a dizzying rush of dread. He was going to die. "Please stop," Jesse screamed. He wasn't ashamed to beg for his life. "Please!" Harry's eyes flashed, his blonde lashes translucent. 3. No! Tears filled Jesse's eyes as he scraped at the metal of the lock, so hard that blood bubbled under his fingernails. 2. The edges of his vision blackened, and the muscles in his legs crumpled. He had escaped the gravity of Earth only to die in the darkness here. 1.